Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be previewing the City game on Tuesday night. I'm delighted to say David Mooney from the Blue Moon podcast is here to join me. David, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Bit chilly, but we'll warm up soon enough, I hope. How are things?
Yeah, all good, mate, all good. Just to say, we're recording this on Saturday morning, so City have not played Salford yet and Brentford have not played Plymouth yet, but you'll be listening to this probably Sunday afternoon. Just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. If you haven't already watched my full-time analysis on my personal channel, the link for that video will be in the description, where I go over the 5-0 away win against Southampton, our first of the season. Feedback on that video has been really positive so far. So yeah, the link for that video will be in the description of this one. David, I'm going to keep this episode pretty brief because I think there's been so much talk about City this season. But it would obviously be good to get your perspective on it, considering you watched.
Yeah, we don't need more now, do we?
But yeah, there's been so much talk about it, but good to get your perspective. But I am going to first start with how I start all the previews in your most recent game. But back-to-back wins for City. Are you back?
No, no, not even slightly. They weren't without incident, the wins. Let's put it that way. You look at the score against West Ham, for instance, and you go, 4-1. That looks comfortable, and you kind of like. I don't really know how it ended up 4-1 because West Ham should have been in front when West Ham could have been 2-0 up when City went 2-0 up. And by the end of it, the mood in the atmosphere in the stadium was a bit weird because they obviously just weren't playing very well. And I would go as far to say that the first kind of 20, 25 minutes is as bad as City have been in this run. Like they were just awful. And popped up with a couple of goals, suddenly 2-0 up, and West Ham decided to go, you know what, have the game. There you go, all yours. And City went away and got the second, got the third and fourth after half time. The West Ham goal kind of made it feel a little bit edgy. I mean, if the earliness of it was probably about 20 minutes to go when West Ham scored. If they got another one, then I think that the mood in the stadium would really have started to turn, because the Feyenoord game is still within living memory of like it still feels very raw. 3-0 up and cruising against not a bad European side, but a side that is not one of the elite, and suddenly you're drawing 3-3. And that game in particular, I remember thinking on the night, I Feyenoord stopped playing, and I was kind of like, I don't really understand why, because you could win this. It's like City are gone. There is just no confidence there whatsoever. So are they back? No. Have the results been good? Yeah, they've been all right in the last couple of games. So it's a weird season now where it's just about whatever points City can get. It's not really about performances. We know what the issues are. Those issues are not going to go away until they get some people in and some new players into the squad. So get what points they can get. This run that's coming up looks pretty grim.
Yeah, you mentioned the issues, and we know what they are. And obviously, as I mentioned at the top of the show, there's been so much talk about City, so much conjecture about what's gone wrong. Aging squad, poor recruitment, Rodri injuries, etc. You watch them every week. What is it? What is it that's gone wrong? Because like from the outside, it's like there's so many things going on. But what do you think it is?
It's a snowballing of a culmination of factors, basically. It starts probably last season. You go back to the winter period last season. They had a slew of games where they drew. They drew with Spurs, should have won. Drew with Liverpool, should have won. Drew at Chelsea 4-4. And it was one of those games that everyone went, what a fantastic game that was. And it ultimately highlighted the problem that City were having in that winter period was they couldn't control games. What's one of the things? So that Brentford away game last season, where Brentford took the lead, City won 3-1 in the end. That was a perfect encapsulation of what City tried to do. And I thought they did it quite well in that game. And that is, don't let the other team have any sort of momentum. And there was a couple of spells in that game where Brentford got on top and had a couple of corners and stuff. And you'll notice that the way City got out of that was they had an opportunity to counter-attack and they didn't. They turned it down. And the entire point of that is to make Brentford drop. Guardiola says all the time, we drop them. He means make the other team drop into their defensive third and make sure they can't get out for a couple of minutes. And what that does is it resets the game, it resets the pattern of play and gets City dominance again on the ball and moving it around. And last season it worked because City, they did it to Brentford, they pushed them back, they forced you had a couple of corners and a couple of chances. I seem to remember Edison making a couple of saves, one off the line, that sort of thing. And then everyone in the team goes, okay, this needs to stop. How does it stop? We make sure it's not end to end. We make sure that they have to go back into their defensive third. We keep the ball. Nothing happens for the next 5 minutes, and that is it. But we're in control with that. That's not happening this season. They cannot keep the ball for love nor money. They end up in a situation where actually it's probably more beneficial to transition, but they're not a team that's built to be able to transition. They're actually very bad at exploiting transitions, at the same time being very bad at defending them, which when you play on the transition, you're kind of inviting the other team to transition as well. It kind of becomes a little bit more like a basketball game. So that is happening. That kind of gradual change has been happening for the last kind of 18 months or so. And then in the summer, they get the transfer window all wrong. They didn't strengthen where they needed to strengthen. They probably decided to squeeze a little bit more juice out of the oranges that they could try and get. And I mean, they brought back Ilkay Gundogan, who, you know, he shouldn't be playing as much as he is playing. I don't think the plan was for him to play as much as he has played. But at the same time, when they let him go, one of the reasons they let him go was they didn't want to offer him a 2-year contract. He wanted a 2-year deal. City were really concerned about that second year. And this would have been that second year. And look at his performances. He's not been the Gundogan we all know and love from the previous spell. So that's happened. Rodri then gets injured. They've had a spell of injuries where you look on paper, the team looks perfectly fine. But I don't think they've had centre backs that can move properly for quite some weeks now. I don't think Akanji's fit. I don't think Ake's fit. And they're just kind of getting through as best they can. The knock-on effect of that has been fatigue to other players. So where normally you would have players that would come in and come out and drop in, drop out when kind of keep everybody fresh, they've had a kind of a core 11, 12, 13 players that have had to play week after week after week after week. And they're all shattered. So that then means that they can't press as well. They can't play out of possession as well as they would normally. The out of possession game's already dropped off from what it should be. And the result is that teams find it very easy to run straight through the middle of City. City can't keep the ball when they get the ball, so they're giving up possession a lot more than they would normally. They're not very incisive when they get it, and they can't pin other teams back. They can't transition very well. They can't create as many chances as they do normally. They can't keep the ball out of their own net because they can't keep the pressure off themselves. And you look at both the West Ham and the Leicester game. You know, in years gone by, neither of those teams would have a spell of possession in that game. And in both of those games, those teams had kind of 4 or 5 minute spells where City could not get the ball and they couldn't press it. They couldn't cut out the passing lanes. They couldn't do all the things that you expect a Pep Guardiola team to do. And it comes down to the culmination of everybody being overworked and overused, the squad actually being slightly too small, and the injuries that they've suffered. So, like, nobody's particularly asking for sympathy at this point. You can't win the Premier League 4 years in a row and go, "Oh God, feel bad for us. Look at all the injuries we've got." Other teams have injuries. Other teams have suspensions. Other teams have fatigue. You kind of get on with it. And the problem is, City's getting on with it is not the same as everybody else is getting on with it. They've tried to do what they would normally do, and it's just actually the solutions to all the problems, like in Guardiola's mind, are we drop back into what we know and we do what we know. We keep the ball, but they can't keep the ball. So what happens is it just makes things 10 times worse. And so from the outside, it looks, goodness me, City have fallen off a cliff. Whereas actually, I don't think they're that far away from what would work. It's just that when it doesn't work, it looks really bad and kind of has the opposite effect. I mentioned that run coming up. I don't know how City are going to do over the next kind of 9-10 weeks or so. It doesn't feel particularly pleasant, but if they can get some players in, they get a bit of freshness back in the legs, they've got a chance of kind of not going on a run like you would expect City in the second half of the season to do, but they've got a chance of making this not look quite as bad as it has been.
It leads me on to a question about January, because there's talk about City being a club that has money to spend. Before that, though, I read an article in The Athletic yesterday, Ollie Kay talking about Jack Grealish. And I know that you've been quite vocal about Grealish on X or Twitter recently. What's going on with Grealish? Because I know there's been like injuries this season. I think there's a stat somewhere that he hasn't scored for City in like 50 games or something like that.
Didn't score in the whole of 2024. Didn't score or assist in the whole of 2024.
So how can you go? Because he had the really good City when he won the treble, and I thought he was quite instrumental. And if you look at some of his stats in that season, it would be easy for someone who hasn't looked into them properly to say that he hasn't really impacted. But Grealish was never built on goals and assists anyway. But I thought he was really pivotal in the treble winning season. So how is it? What's gone on?
It's really weird. And I think, I think he's in the last chance saloon if he's not already left it and gone. The way Guardiola was speaking after the West Ham game, it feels like he's had enough. It feels like he's if he isn't out of road, then he's the road. He's Wile E. Coyote looking for the road runner, and it's kind of like inches away from coming off the end of the cliff in the cartoons. Because he was instrumental in that treble winning season, and exactly what I've just talked about there with City forcing teams to drop. Grealish is perfect for that. He is able to buy free kicks. He's able to keep the ball and know when to attack with it and when to make sure that the other team can't get out. And you think back to the Real Madrid game in that treble winning season, the 4-0 at the Etihad. Real Madrid had something like 18 touches in City's box in the entirety of the game, and like the vast majority of the game was played in Madrid's defensive third. That never happens. The reason that happened was because City turned the dial up to 11, and the players like Bernardo and Grealish on the wings were going, "No, you're not getting out." And in the kind of 2 years since, that isn't Jack Grealish anymore. When he's played, he's kept the ball and he's won free kicks, but he's like that's not enough. There's not enough there to kind of warrant the place in the team. And as you say, he's never been built on the creative side of the game. I think he is unfairly kind of judged on his numbers. I think that his lack of numbers are. I think a lot is made of it, but at the same time, no goals and no assists in 2024 is, it's pathetic, isn't it? Really, from somebody who's a forward player in a team that's supposed to be one of the most attacking in the world. So there is that. I think I also think last season when he was fit, he did well when he came in, but he wasn't fit enough, and he wasn't available enough. And Guardiola, there was one point last season where Guardiola was really angry with him for not being ready. And that's not like, when you see managers get annoyed that subs aren't ready to come on. It's not that ready in the sense of, well, it feels like you haven't warmed up properly. It feels like you haven't got yourself ready to start this game. And lo and behold, 20 minutes in, you're injured. I think it was Copenhagen away. And it feels like all these little off the pitch things now have built up, and Guardiola just doesn't trust him. He was sanctioned, I think, for the end of the season for just not either not training very well, not turning up to training on time, like being like consistent sort of like those behavioural sort of problems. And he missed the Fulham away game entirely. He was fit but wasn't in the squad. And then in every single game after that, he was an unused substitute. And it felt very much like Guardiola saying, look, I've had enough this season. Go away, get yourself sorted, come back next year. And now we're in the January of next year and we've barely seen him. And that doesn't bode well. So listen, I love the guy. I think he's brilliant for what City want to do. But he hasn't been doing that for 18 months now. And I think that is a problem. That is a real problem. And, you've paid 100 million for the guy. You've got, he's in his fourth season. It's kind of, you should know better by now. You should know what you need to do to be in this team. And if he's been fit and not in the team, that's quite a damning indictment. He has also had injuries this season. That has also been a problem with his ability to get in there consistently. But again, it's that preparation. Is that him not being ready for games? If he's available for one, misses two. Available for one, misses two. And like, I don't want to be too. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what he is dealing with in his private life. I don't know what like the factors are that are going into that. But if you're going to be a key player for City, then you have to be available, and he just hasn't been available, and that's been the issue. So, I mean, I would love him to turn this around. I wonder if that ship sailed. I wonder if that is even possible at this stage.
I think everyone kind of wants him to turn it around because it's not too long ago that he was making a big impact for England at the Euros, and then he didn't even go to the last World Cup. It's just like the player that Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa. We kind of saw it in that treble-winning season, but that's it. And like his ceiling when he was at Aston Villa was he's maybe one of the first names on the team sheet in terms of England going to the Euros and England going to World Cup, and then to be left out completely. It's just I want him to do well. I think the wider kind of football sphere wants him to do well. It's just a shame
I think what's really telling is City have had this season real problems stopping teams running straight through the middle of them. And Grealish would be like, if you played Grealish centrally, he would be someone who could stop that happening. Like you think of that treble win inside. There are two incidents I can think of that are not attacking moments from Grealish. One against Liverpool, one against Spurs, where the other team were effectively clean through. And he was the one that sprinted the entire length of the pitch to get back and make the interception or make the tackle. And that sort of defensive nous and ability, City have been crying out for in the centre of the pitch. He's been used there once this season. That's it. Yeah. And that kind of says to me, if you're not going to use him, then there is a reason why he isn't there. And I don't think it's ability.
Okay, January, David. Money to spend. Where do you need it?
Everywhere, absolutely everywhere. The centre of midfield is utterly urgent. So Rodri isn't there. You're not going to get a replacement for Rodri. He's the best in the world at what he does. So the question becomes: do you want to sign someone who is a step down from Rodri, who won't play when Rodri's fit, or do you want to get support in elsewhere? I think the better thing to do is get support in elsewhere. They've tried the Rodri downgrade, and I mean, you could argue that Phillips was never the right player, but it was a terrible decision to sign him, and it worked out terribly. I don't see the point in doing that sort of thing again. If you're going to spend big in that position, you're going to have to spend with someone who is, at least able to compete with Rodri. And the talk was Zubimendi. They've since the cold water's since kind of been poured on that, where it seems like the club are not actually looking at that. So fine, okay, don't do that. If you're going to bank on Rodri, don't do that position. What you need to do, though, is get players in who have a bit of athleticism and mobility in the centre. Because when you play a central three of that includes Gundogan and Bernardo, then you've not got anything there that as soon as the ball is the wrong side of them, they're out of the game. They can't get back. Yeah. So you need somebody who is going to be able to get back and be able to help them out as a 6 or an 8. That is kind of top priority. By the sounds of things, they're going after centre halves, which I mean, I'm not dead against. The 4 centre backs City have got, John Stones, I absolutely love him to bits. He was fantastic in that treble winning season. Always injured, he's never available. Nathan Ake, love him to bits. He is so underrated as a centre back. So good in the air. Actually a lot quicker than people realise. Injury prone. He's been playing through injury at the moment. Akanji's good. I absolutely love Diaz. Diaz is the one that I think they need to build the defence around going forward. But again, all 4 of them have been suffering injuries this season. Gvardiol his head is absolutely fried with everything that's been going on. He needs to come out of the team and just be taken away from it all. There's nobody to come in, so he's been having to play through it all. And so you've got all of those. I think it's time to rip the sticking plaster off. You've got to get rid of a couple that you maybe don't want to get rid of, but you've got to get some people who are available. So, yeah, target the centre-backs. I wonder if the plan is in January to get a couple of centre-backs in, and then Akanji can kind of step forward into midfield and do that role. I don't think it'll be John Stones. He's not been available for a long time now. He's suffering with injuries. And beyond that, I don't know. There's creativity up front, but there's no real threat. I mean, how they've got Doku and Savinho. Savinho's come into his own in the last couple of games, to be fair to him. But before that, they've been creative without actually creating anything, if that makes sense. They're really good at running at the box, but then they get to the box and kind of nothing happens after that. They get into crossing positions and it goes behind players, doesn't find Haaland. I mean, Haaland himself he's been feeding off scraps in the last few games. Got himself a couple of goals, but like if your entire team is built to serve one guy at the front of the pitch, you've got to get the ball to him, and they're just not being able to do that. So they need players who can do that. It's a bit of a mess at the minute, and whatever they choose to spend in January, it can only be good because there's been nobody available. There's not been enough options for rotation, and there just needs to be something different. It needs somebody to come in and shake it all up. So they need some creativity up top. They need a bit of defensive solidity, and they need somebody who can be a bit athletic in the centre of the pitch. If they can get those 10 players in this January, they might be all right.
Let's talk about the game, David. What did you make of the reverse fixture at the Etihad? We spoke a bit about it on your podcast. I was quite surprised in terms of the way we took the game to City in the first kind of 20 minutes. Obviously, it changed after that once Haaland got the equaliser. But it wasn't a game, and I don't think we've been blown away in any games that we've played against Pep Guardiola since we've been in the Premier League. But what did you make of that reverse fixture, and how might that affect the game on Tuesday night?
I don't think it affects the game on Tuesday night because I think you're good. I think you're very good. Brentford have always been a bit of a bogey team's a bit of an odd word, given that City's record against them isn't actually that bad. I think the treble winning, I think that season, the 22-23 season, kind of sits in everybody's mind because that pre-World Cup game, I've never seen anything like it in terms of an away performance at City, because like you were so direct, but so kind of pinpoint accurate with it, that there was just like Ivan Toney that day was completely unplayable, and that was one of the big reasons for the game. But like for the way the game went, but like Mbeumo running off him was like the ability to just get the ball up to him hold it up, and then find Mbeumo. Just like it meant that City couldn't do that again. Do that thing where they forced Brentford to drop and never have that threat of going forward. The final day is the final day. It was what it was. Both teams changed. Brentford won it. But you kind of roll that forward over the seasons that followed, and I mean, you think of the 1-0 win at the Etihad last season. That was an atrocious game that City only won because I think was it Ben Mee slipped over.
It was Chris Ayer. Chris Ayer,
yeah. Somebody slipped and Haaland ran through, and if it wasn't for that, City wouldn't have won. And it was a really frustrating game where Brentford were brilliant and City were just unable to offer anything to kind of counter it. And then you again come forward to this season, and I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how you've lost that game. Really, you were just as good as City in that game, if not deserving to edge it. And it was a real horrid fight. And the one kind of running theme through all of these City games is that it's a horrid fight. And you project that onto Tuesday's game. I don't think City have got that fight anymore. I don't think City have got what I don't see how City stop Brentford scoring in this game, and I don't see how City score. That is like the perfect combination for this is clearly a write-off of a game. Stick in the fact that it's a night game. I mean, immediately that for some reason night games, the atmosphere suddenly goes better, and like City have dealt well in the past with hostile atmospheres. But I mean, the City team, I don't know what they've got going on upstairs. I don't know how mentally resilient they are. They've spent the last 3 months facing setbacks and going, oh well, that's that then, and folding as soon as they've had some sort of setback. So it just doesn't feel a very appetizing game. I think there is a real. I mean, you mentioned like the tactical approach in the last game, and Thomas Frank going man to man. If he does that, I think there are. If you have 10 duels across the pitch with all the outfield players, Brentford could easily win 10 out of 10 there. That's quite a terrifying prospect for somebody who, like, for this team, the away team in this game should be better. They should be a lot better than that. I just don't think they are right now, and I think. If you play anywhere near the best of your ability, I don't think you'll have any problems on Tuesday night. I really don't.
This is Great foreshadowing for like a 4-0 City.
I just don't see how that happens. I could be entirely wrong. That could happen. I think there's comfort in like the evidence of the last few weeks. Like you asked at the start, are City back? And there's no evidence to suggest that they are, other than they've won 2 games in a row. And you can easily look at that and go, yeah, that's what City do. They win games. But the manner in which they've won them does not suggest that City are playing anywhere near their best right now. And it's little things as well, like the bounce of the ball. And I always say, sometimes you just know how a season is going to go by what little bits of luck you're getting. And there's been so many times where players have gone in for a 50-50 and the opposition player has come out with the ball and is now the wrong side of the defender. That's happening a lot for City this season. Once or twice, it's an accident. When it happens consistently, there is an issue there that's going wrong. And again, if you're battling and you're up for it, you'll win those duels and you'll win the 50-50s, and that'll swing the game. The hope that City have is that Brentford missed their chances. If you look at the certainly the last 2 games, West Ham missed a hatful of chances. Leicester, they hit the post and the bar and missed a couple of decent chances in there. If you are clinical in those chances, you will have no problems whatsoever. If you're not clinical, then you open yourself up to City scoring City scoring 1 from a set piece or something like that. I don't see. Like, you look at the performance where City tried to control Brentford last season and came away 3-1 winners. I just don't see how that happens. I just really don't see how that happens.
Who's impressed you for Brentford this season, David?
We were talking on Blue Moon. It would be remiss of me not to mention Damsgaard at this point, given City's inability to, given what you're like with him, but also given City's inability to stop anything happening in the centre of the pitch, and given the fact that City are desperate for any sort of central midfield. In fact, any of them. Can we have Norgard as well? Just kind of just team them up in the centre of the pitch, and City will be all right. You look at the Fantasy League table as something else as well, and Mark Flecken's my goalkeeper. You were talking about maybe he's not been particularly as impressive as the outside world thinks, but he's earning me points, and that's all I care about. And then the front line, Wisser and Mbeumo are. They're just great, aren't they? They're just the problem that I have with them in the fantasy league is whichever one I pick, the other one does really well, and then I swap it over, and the other one does really well. So what that says is that you're not reliant. You're not reliant on either of them. So it's like you neutralize one, the other one does the damage. So sod it. Any of them could cause problems this season. But yeah, I think what you've built at the minute is a really good team unit, and results haven't been great in the last few weeks, but I think it's surely only temporary, because I think Thomas Frank as a coach is fantastic. I think he's demonstrated now, because correct me, I might be terribly wrong on this, but correct me if I'm wrong. You were really open and attractive and kind of free flowing when you came up from the Championship. And then first couple of years in the Premier League, he went, no, we're not doing that. That's suicide if we do that. And then he kind of built a system that was very direct to Ivan Toney. And then obviously Toney leaves, and he's now built a system that is now open and attacking again. And it's kind of like his ability to adapt just says like I think he's a really good coach. And I think the fact that he went man for man at City earlier in the season when City probably weren't expecting it, I think is to his credit, and I think he's probably got his head screwed on enough to know exactly what he needs to do to take City apart on Tuesday night.
Well, my last question, David, was going to be, are you confident ahead of the game? But I think you've pretty much answered.
No, of course I'm not. You look at City might win. I think if City do win, then I don't think it's a shock per se, but I think it's against the run of form. Let's put it that way. But if City don't win, just looking at the remainder of the fixtures. Like after Brentford away, Ipswich away. Well, they've just done Chelsea at Portman Road, so I'm not entirely confident about that. They then go to PSG, which will not be. PSG are struggling in the Champions League this season, but so are City. So that's a movable force meets a stoppable. That's a movable object meets a stoppable force, isn't it? They're right there. Chelsea at home, Bruges at home, Arsenal away, Newcastle at home, Liverpool at home, Tottenham away. Forest away, Brighton at home. When are they winning again? Like the way that City are playing right now, I cannot bank that any of these will result in 3 points. So no, I'm not confident at all. If you offered me a narrow Brentford win right now, I would take it, because it could quite easily get ugly on Tuesday night. Unless in the meantime City have got some fit and healthy players through the door. I don't see how this is anything other than a torturous watch for the away fans.
You've given me quite a few options for my thumbnail, David. So I thank you. I think that would be a good place to wrap things up.
Just tearing my hair out consistently. Yeah.
The Ealing Red podcast will be back next week for the Man City full-time show. There's also going to be another video on my channel dropping, which is going to be a very YouTube-y video rating every Brentford player's season so far on a tier list. That'll be quite fun. So yeah, the link for my channel will be in the description of this video. Just remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the City game. How we're going to play, what we're going to set up. Are we going to be in a similar system to when we went to the Etihad and we lost 2-1? Or how do you think the game's going to go? Let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and follow us on the socials at Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. David, an absolute pleasure, mate. Good luck on Saturday for Salford, but no, bad luck for Tuesday.
we're gonna need all the luck in the world. Surely not for Salford, but surely for Tuesday. I just thinking that I wonder if your player ratings, I wonder how many of them would be above mine for City players.
Probably quite a few.
Probably the vast majority of them, yeah.
Nice one, David. Cheers.
Thank you very much.